Captain Ryan Cole had always been meticulous. Some called him obsessive, others called him precise, but he preferred the word aware. He noticed details that most people overlooked: the smallest scratches on a fuselage, the faintest irregularities in the engine's hum, or the way a fellow pilot hesitated before taking a risk. That morning, as he walked through the sprawling hangar of Echo Base, his eyes, as always, scanned the scene, catching the rhythm of mechanics at work, the hiss of pneumatic tools, and the occasional clatter of dropped wrenches. But among all the routine movements, something unusual made him pause. Near the far corner of the hangar, close to an old, half-disassembled fighter jet, stood a man he had often seen but never truly noticed. He was old, much older than the other mechanics, with gray, streaked hair peeking from under a faded cap and hands rough with decades of work. His overalls were streaked with oil stains, and his posture carried the slight stoop of someone who had spent years bent over engines, peering into every hidden corner of a machine. Most pilots simply passed him by, murmuring greetings if at all, but Ryan felt an unexpected pull that made him slow his pace. It was the patch on the man's sleeve that caught his attention. At first glance, it seemed like any other patch, a worn emblem of some defunct squadron. But as Ryan's eyes focused, he realized it wasn't ordinary at all. The patch depicted a bird rising from flames, black threads fraying at the edges, but the design was unmistakable. The symbol was bold, almost alive, as if it had a story of its own. Beneath the phoenix were two simple, embroidered words, Black Phoenix. Ryan froze mid-step, a strange chill running down his spine. He had seen the emblem before years ago in a history book buried deep in the military archives. But it had been decades since anyone spoke of the Black Phoenix. It was rumored to be the insignia of a secretive unit, one so elite and shadowed that their missions were officially erased from records. Pilots who had flown alongside them spoke of them in hushed tones, as though saying the name aloud could summon ghosts. Curiosity mingled with unease as Ryan's mind raced. Why would this old, unassuming mechanic be wearing such a symbol? And why had no one else noticed? It wasn't flashy or large. It was subtle, almost hidden on the sleeve of his overalls. But for someone who paid attention to details, like Ryan, it screamed of secrets and stories waiting to be told. Ryan approached cautiously, his boots echoing softly against the polished hangar floor. "Excuse me," he began, keeping his voice low so as not to startle the man. "That patch, the Black Phoenix, where did you get it?" The mechanic looked up slowly, as if Ryan's question had awakened a memory long buried. His eyes were a soft gray, calm yet carrying a depth that made Ryan instinctively step closer. The silence stretched for a moment, heavy with unspoken histories, before the mechanic finally spoke. "This old thing." His voice was gentle, almost wistful. "It stays with me because it belongs to people I never want to forget." Ryan blinked. "People you knew?" he asked, unsure how to phrase it. The words sounded inadequate even as they left his mouth. The old man gave a faint nod. Yes, people who mattered, more than the world ever knew. He returned his attention to the jet, wiping his hands on a rag as though the conversation were already over. But Ryan could sense a quiet intensity in him, a story locked behind those calm eyes, something that had survived time and silence. For a moment, Ryan felt a strange connection, an invisible thread linking him to this man who had lived in the shadows of history. There was a sense of mystery, a weight of experience that seemed almost tangible. He realized that he had stumbled upon someone extraordinary hiding in plain sight, a man whose quiet presence in the hangar masked a life filled with unimaginable deeds. The patch was more than fabric. It was a marker, a relic, a testament to courage, loyalty, and survival. Ryan's instincts told him that this was a story he needed to hear, that there was a chapter of history hidden behind those gray eyes and rough hands. He could feel it in his chest, a pulse of anticipation, a hint of danger, and a surge of respect all at once. He studied the emblem again, the phoenix black and eternal, rising from invisible flames, and the words beneath it. Black Phoenix, he whispered them under his breath. There was a reverence in saying the words, as if invoking them might awaken something long dormant. The man's gaze flicked toward him, and Ryan thought he saw a recognition, not just of Ryan, but of the significance of the moment. And then, almost imperceptibly, the mechanic's expression shifted, the calm eyes hardening slightly. Ryan realized that those words, that patch, carried weight far beyond what anyone at the base could understand. It was a history of sacrifice, courage, and missions that had been erased from every official record. It was dangerous, silent, and noble all at once. Ryan took a deep breath. He needed to know more. Whatever story lay behind that patch, it was not just history. It was alive, and it was waiting for him to discover it. And in that quiet hangar, among engines and oil stains, a connection formed, fragile but unmistakable, between a young pilot with a keen eye and an old mechanic whose past refused to be forgotten. Ryan's curiosity was no longer just idle, it was urgent. There was something here, something profound, hidden beneath the surface. And he knew, with a sudden clarity, that this ordinary morning at the hangar had just turned into the beginning of a story he would never forget. Ryan stood in front of the old mechanic, his mind racing with questions, yet unsure which to ask first. He had seen the patch, he had seen the emblem, and now he wanted the story behind it. Black Phoenix, he said slowly, almost tasting the words aloud. I've read about them. A long time ago, weren't they? A covert unit. People say they vanished without a trace. The mechanic, who introduced himself as Mr. Hale, nodded slightly but didn't immediately answer. His hands, still darkened with oil from the morning's work, rested on the edge of the jet. His eyes, calm yet distant, seemed to look through Ryan rather than at him, as if seeing something far away, something Ryan could not yet understand. There was a silence, heavy with history and untold secrets, stretching between them. People don't talk about Phoenix anymore, Hale said finally, his voice low and careful, like someone handling fragile glass. Too many secrets, too much loss. Ryan leaned closer, sensing that every word from this man would carry weight. A loss, he asked. What happened? Hale sighed, a sound that seemed to carry decades of memory. We were a unit formed in the shadows, he began. The world didn't know us, and sometimes it's better that way. We weren't heroes, at least not the kind that get medals or parades. We were trained to do the impossible. Missions no one else would dare, rescues that seemed hopeless. To survive, we relied on each other, and that symbol. He lifted a hand briefly, tracing the edge of the patch on his sleeve. That symbol wasn't for pride. It was a reminder of what we had lost and what we had to protect. Ryan's curiosity deepened. He could feel the air around Hale grow heavier, as if the hangar itself was holding its breath. And you were? He asked cautiously, not wanting to push too far. Hale looked at him then, really looked at him, and Ryan saw the faint glimmer of pain behind the calm gray eyes. I wasn't always a mechanic, Hale said simply. Once, I flew missions I would never have imagined. And yes, I was a pilot, a Black Phoenix pilot. Ryan blinked, disbelief mixing with awe. But, the records, there's nothing about your unit, about the missions. How is that possible? Hale's lips curved in a faint, bitter smile. Because we were never supposed to exist. Every mission we undertook, erased. Every report destroyed. Our work was invisible. Our deeds meant only to save lives and disappear. Sometimes, to protect the people we rescued, we had to vanish ourselves from the world. The weight of his words pressed against Ryan's chest. He had never met anyone like this man, someone who had lived through extraordinary events and kept them secret for decades. What kind of missions? Ryan asked, barely able to breathe. Hale's gaze drifted to the corner of the hangar, where the shadows pooled beneath the jet. He seemed to see images in the air-old friends, dangerous flights, nights filled with fire and desperation. We rescued pilots trapped behind enemy lines. Sometimes it was a single man, sometimes it was an entire squadron. The conditions, impossible. We flew through storms, evaded radar, sometimes even flew into enemy territory with no support. Many of my teammates didn't survive. Some were lost because of me, some because the world demanded it. Ryan's stomach tightened. He could feel the enormity of what Hale had lived through. This wasn't just heroism. It was survival, sacrifice, and guilt carried silently for decades. "And the patch?" Ryan asked quietly, gesturing toward Hale's sleeve. Hale's hand lingered over it. "This patch is all I have left of them, my friends, my squad, each mission, each life saved. It's here." He pressed his fingers lightly against the fabric, as if feeling the ghosts of the past. "I wear it not for glory, but to remember. To remind myself that even when the world forgets, some promises must be kept." Ryan could see the honesty in Hale's eyes. There was no exaggeration, no attempt to impress, just the quiet, enduring weight of someone who had lived a life most people couldn't imagine. "But why work here as a mechanic?" Ryan asked, trying to understand how a man of such extraordinary past ended up among engines and tools. Hale gave a small shrug. "The world changed. Our skills were no longer needed. There were no accolades, no parades. But planes still needed to fly. People still needed help. Saving lives didn't end when the war did. I realized I could continue saving people in other ways. Fixing a plane. Ensuring it doesn't fail. That's another kind of mission." Ryan nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "So, all these years you've kept flying in a sense. Just not in the sky." Hale smiled softly, a faint glimmer of humor mixed with sorrow. "Exactly. The missions changed, the battlefield changed, but the promise to never leave someone behind, that never changed." For a long moment Ryan was silent, absorbing every word. He realized that this old mechanic wasn't just a man who repaired jets. He was a living reminder of courage, duty, and loyalty that had survived in the shadows. The Black Phoenix patch was more than a symbol. It was a history, a memory, a weight of decades carried quietly on the sleeve of a man who had risked everything and asked for nothing in return. Then Hale looked at him with a sudden intensity that startled Ryan. "I may be old, pilot, but the past has a way of catching up with us, and sometimes it chooses the right moment to remind us who we really are." Ryan felt the weight of those words settle over him like a storm cloud. He didn't fully understand what Hale meant yet, but he knew one thing. He had stumbled into a story far bigger than anything he had ever known. The hangar, the jet, the quiet mechanics, all of it had faded into the background. All that remained was the old man, the patch, and a history that demanded to be heard. And for Ryan, the air around him now seemed charged with anticipation. There was something coming, something tied to this man, this patch, this promise. And he had a feeling that the moment was closer than he imagined. Hale took a deep breath and leaned against the cold metal of the jet, as if the hangar itself would absorb the memories he was about to share. "It was my first mission as a Black Phoenix pilot," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made Ryan lean closer. "We had been called to retrieve a pilot trapped behind enemy lines. His aircraft had malfunctioned, leaving him stranded in hostile territory. Intelligence said the area was heavily guarded, mines in the valleys, and enemy patrols constantly moving. The odds, they were stacked against us, nearly impossible." Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. "Impossible," he repeated. "How did you even attempt it?" Hale's eyes darkened. "We had no choice. The pilot's position was estimated, but nothing was exact. Nightfall was our only chance. Our unit had a code. Failure was never an option. Lives depended on precision, trust, and speed. We prepared quickly, double-checked every system, and launched under the cover of darkness." The storm was already brewing. Ryan imagined the scene. An aircraft cutting through a violent storm, lightning slicing the sky, wind howling through the cockpit. How bad was the storm? He asked, gripping the edge of the jet as if to ground himself from the story. "Bad enough to tear metal apart," Hale said quietly. "The clouds were so thick you could barely see a foot in front of the nose. Every gust of wind was a threat. Every instrument had to be read perfectly, every decision timed to the second. One mistake, one miscalculation, and we wouldn't come back." He paused as if reliving the fear. "And then we reached the target area. The pilot was barely conscious, pinned under the wreckage of his aircraft. The terrain was rugged, rocks sharp, slopes steep. Enemy patrols were close, far too close. I had to land precisely, hover the aircraft in a small clearing, and get him on board before anyone saw us. My heart was racing. Every second mattered. Every sound could mean death. Ryan could almost hear the pounding of Hale's heart, feel the tension in the air. "And you managed to reach him?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Hale nodded. "Yes, but it wasn't without cost." As I lifted off, a missile, likely from a hidden battery, struck near the tail. The helicopter lurched violently. My co-pilot, the bravest man I ever knew, took control instantly, trying to stabilize us. But the chopper hit the ground hard, skidding across rocks. My friend, my brother-in-arms, he didn't make it. He saved me. He saved the pilot, and then he was gone. Ryan felt a lump in his throat. He had never imagined heroism so raw, so immediate, so sacrificial. I'm sorry," he whispered, though the words felt meaningless. Hale's expression didn't change, but his eyes shimmered with quiet grief. "We never asked for apologies. We only did what we promised, what we swore to do. That patch," he said, tapping the black phoenix on his sleeve, "was given to me by him. He pressed it into my hand before he passed. 'Promise me you'll keep flying,' he said. 'Promise me you'll keep saving, keep rising from fire.'" Ryan swallowed hard. He could feel the enormity of that promise pressing down on him. "And that's why you kept the patch?" he asked. "Yes," Hale said simply. "I wear it because it reminds me of the lives lost, the lives saved, and the promise I made. Every time I fix a plane, every time I help a pilot, I honor that memory. It's not about glory. It's about duty, and about never leaving anyone behind." Ryan could hardly believe the story he was hearing. Each word, each pause, each glance carried the weight of years and battles he could not imagine. "And you never told anyone." Hale shook his head. "Our missions were secret. Even after the war, after the world forgot, there were people who might have misunderstood our actions. We didn't fight for recognition. We fought because we had to. The pilot we rescued that night, he didn't even know our names. We didn't exist on paper. But the promise never left me." The hangar seemed quieter now, as if the walls themselves were listening. Ryan looked at Hale, really looked at him, and saw not just an old mechanic, but a man forged in fire and loss, tempered by courage and bound by honor. Every tool on the bench, every oil-stained rag, every jet Hale had repaired in the years since, each was an extension of his ongoing mission. Hale's voice softened, almost a whisper. "That was just the first mission. There were many more. Each one tested us in ways no one can imagine. There were nights when we flew without sleep, days when we navigated deserts with sandstorms so thick they blinded us, and moments when we thought we wouldn't survive the next hour. And yet, we always made it. Somehow, we always made it." Ryan's pulse quickened. He realized that this man had survived danger not once, but countless times. That patch on his sleeve was not just a symbol. It was a lifeline, a promise, a chronicle of bravery that had endured decades. "It must have been terrifying," Ryan said, his voice tight. Hale's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Terrifying," he admitted, "but every life saved made it worth it. Every time I looked at a pilot's face and knew they would go home safely, it reminded me why we took those risks, and it reminds me still, every day." Ryan could feel the story settling in his chest like a living presence. It was more than history. It was a testament to courage, sacrifice, and the quiet heroism of someone who refused to be forgotten. The Black Phoenix wasn't just a patch. It was a life, a mission, a promise kept through fire and loss, rising again with every act of kindness, every life saved. And in that moment, Ryan knew the story was far from over. The past had a way of returning, and the lessons of Hale's hidden life were about to reach him in ways he could never have anticipated. A week later, Ryan found himself strapped into the cockpit of his jet during a routine training flight. The sky was clear, deceptively calm, and the hum of the engines felt like a lullaby. But he knew better. He had flown enough hours to know that even the quietest skies could turn deadly in seconds. As he climbed higher, checking instruments and scanning the horizon, a sudden jolt ran through the aircraft. The engine sputtered violently. Alarms screamed inside the cockpit, red lights flashing like a warning from some unseen force. Ryan's training kicked in automatically. checklists, backup systems, emergency protocols. But nothing seemed to work. The jet continued to lose altitude, tumbling toward the ground faster than he could react. Panic gnawed at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself to focus, hands gripping the controls. Then a voice crackled over the radio, calm and certain. "Ryan, listen to me. I've seen this failure before. You can stabilize it." Ryan froze. That voice, low, firm, unmistakable, belonged to Hale. How are you?" He stammered, disbelief making his words catch in his throat. "Focus on the sequence I give you. Trust me," Hale said. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the steady command of someone who had faced death countless times and survived. Ryan followed the instructions, each step precise. Adjust the throttle, counter the yaw, stabilize the pitch. His hands shook, sweat running down his temples, but Hale's voice never wavered. Step by step, motion by motion, the jet began to respond. The alarms faded. The red lights dimmed. Slowly, agonizingly, the aircraft leveled. By the time Ryan touched down on the runway, heart pounding and limbs trembling, he could barely comprehend what had just happened. He climbed out of the cockpit, shaking, and saw Hale standing there, his overalls as stained with oil as ever, but the black Phoenix patch glinting faintly in the sun. "Mr. Hale," Ryan said, voice hoarse. How did you know what to do?" Hale placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Because I once made a promise to save pilots. No matter the years, no matter the storms, no matter the danger, I keep my promise. You trusted me, and now you know why the Black Phoenix exists." Ryan stared at him, understanding dawning. He had not been saved by luck or by technology. He had been saved by decades of experience, by a man who had spent his life in the shadows, risking everything for strangers he might never meet again. The patch, the emblem, the words, it was all a living reminder of courage that refused to fade. You kept flying," Ryan whispered, awestruck. "All these years you never stopped." Hale's eyes softened. The missions changed, the battlefield changed, but the promise, that never changed, whether in the sky or on the ground, saving lives is always worth the risk. Ryan felt his eyes sting. He had expected an old mechanic, a quiet man who fixed planes and kept to himself. He had not expected a hero who had faced death countless times, whose courage had endured long after the world had forgotten. "Thank you," he said, voice trembling. "Thank you for saving me, for everything." Hale smiled, humble and warm. "It's not about thanks, it's about the promise. You remember it now, and maybe someday you'll pass it on. The Black Phoenix isn't just about one man, one mission, or one patch. It's about rising again, through fire, through loss, through life's trials, and saving those who need it most." Ryan looked down at the patch again, the Black Phoenix rising from invisible flames. Suddenly, it made sense. The emblem wasn't just a symbol of a forgotten squad. It was a living philosophy, a reminder that kindness, courage, and duty could endure, even when the world was silent, even when no one noticed. Hale had turned every act of repair, every plane he had maintained, into an extension of that promise. "I understand now," Ryan said softly. "I understand why you kept it all these years. It's not just history, it's life." Hale nodded. "And now it's your turn, Ryan. The skies will test you, and life will demand you rise. Never forget the promise, and never leave anyone behind." Ryan felt a profound weight settle on his shoulders. Not burdensome, but sacred. Hale had shown him that heroism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, unseen, and unrecorded. Sometimes it was a patch on a sleeve, a voice over a radio, or a hand reaching out when the world seemed ready to let someone fall. As Ryan walked away from the jet, he glanced back at Hale, the Black Phoenix patch catching the sunlight. For the first time he truly understood what it meant. Heroism, courage, and kindness could survive through time, through silence, through decades of forgotten battles. They could rise again like the phoenix to save someone in need. Hale watched him go, a faint smile on his face. The world had changed, the skies had changed, but the promise endured. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the hangar, among tools and planes, the Black Phoenix remained, alive, unbroken, and rising. Ryan knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a story of past missions, but a living testament that kindness and courage, even in the most hidden corners, could change lives. And as he looked at the horizon, he felt ready for whatever storms lay ahead, carrying with him the weight and the wisdom of a hero the world had never known.